lovely, life-giving water. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Morning Bible. It's wonderful to have you once again. We are in Luke chapter 14. Yesterday's reading was cool. Yesterday's one was like the last of three like Sabbath teachings Jesus does that are sort of spread out throughout Luke's Gospel. But today is a part 2 instead of a part 3. It's part 2 of Jesus at dinner. I didn't realise this, but yesterday's passage, Jesus is at dinner with some Pharisees and he tells them something. And today we are continuing straight on. This passage goes straight on. Jesus is still at dinner. He has another lesson for people around the dinner table. So let's jump into it. Luke chapter 14 verse 7. The parable of the wedding feast. Now Jesus told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the places of honour, saying to them, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the place of honour, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person.' And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he may say to you, 'Friend, move up higher,' and then you will be honoured in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." So this is a fun little passage. It's not tongue-in-cheek. It's not like, it's not genuine, but it's like a bit funny. Like it's a bit, because Jesus is sort of playing with like social situations and like a social faux pas that you would make, and he's kind of using that social faux pas to point out a valuable life lesson for people to learn. So what's the parable about? Well, parable is all about a wedding feast. So I've defined parable before, haven't I? A parable is basically where Jesus tells a story that's kind of metaphorical for something else. It's a parable. It's quite simple. So Jesus is telling people about this wedding feast, and the focus of this is to teach people humility. So Jesus is at dinner with these Pharisees. So yesterday he was at dinner with the Pharisees, and today he's still at dinner with the Pharisees. The Pharisees are people who are teachers of the law. They are people who have kind of taken the Jewish scriptures and corrupted them a little bit and used them to kind of gain social status. And that's what Jesus is criticising here. He's saying these Pharisees and all these people round for dinner, and these people are sitting themselves in like the best seats possible in the house. Jesus is saying, hang on a minute, let's have a little story to examine why this is wrong. So let's go through it. Jesus says, "When you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honour, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, 'Give your place to this person.' And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place." So that's a very long sentence. But essentially, imagine a wedding feast, right? You're going to a wedding, and it's the reception, they've got all the food coming out, it's like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, because that's when you always eat at weddings, it's a nightmare. But instead of having all the little like name cards on each of the places so that everyone's got their seating plan and everyone knows where they're supposed to be, it was just kind of a free-for-all. And people just kind of arrive and just take the seats they want to take. It would be an absolute nightmare, because you have the bride and groom's table, you have the sort of 2 most important people at the wedding are both sat on this table. And so who gets to sit on that table with them? Well, if you say yourself, you're kind of a little bit, not humble, shall we say. That's essentially what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, you're like the father of the bride or whatever, like obviously those people get a place. But it's just like, if that's just your mate, and you just confidently walk up to the wedding table, and you're like, all right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to sit right next to the groom. That's my spot. I'm going to be at his right hand. That's where I'm going. I'm going to sit right with the groom. There's going to be an awkward conversation that happens when actually like their sister arrives and they're like, "Yes, sorry, could you move so my sister can sit here?" Jesus is telling that story. And so it's a big social faux pas, and it's quite funny really to like imagine that situation, to imagine the kind of person who would put themselves in like the seat of honour at a wedding who would say, oh, I'm important enough to sit right here. It's kind of funny to imagine the ego that would be with that person. But Jesus is essentially pointing that out to these people and saying, that's what you guys kind of do regularly. The reason why he brings it up is because he noticed how they chose the places of honour at this dinner table. So there were places of honour and certain people chose to sit in them. So Jesus noticed that, but he's sort of extending this out to a wider thing in their entire lives, saying, look, you guys, you're not humbling yourselves. You have this estimation of yourself that you can just sit in the place of honour whenever you want, and that's not a healthy way to live. That's not how you're supposed to be living. You're supposed to be humble. And so how does the passage go on? He says, but when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honoured in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. So you can imagine that instead. Imagine like you go into this room and you've got all these tables free and you sit right in the back corner and you're like, no, I'm not going to put myself in the middle of things. I'm just going to sit here and, you know, be quiet. And then the groom walks in and he's like, dude, what are you doing? Come over and sit on, like, maybe not the you know, what's the name? The table of honour? I'm going to call it the table of honour. No, maybe he won't say come and sit at the table of honour, but he'll say come and sit at this table, or, you know, come sit near me. You deserve to be much nearer than that. And that will be so much better of a thing for you, for the people around you to see. The host will get a better estimation of you as a friend, because they'll say, wow, that person is really humble and doesn't put himself, you know, in my sister's seat. Like, yeah, that's essentially what Jesus is saying. He's extending this out to your life as a whole. He's saying that everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and all who humbles himself will be exalted. In Luke's Gospel, we see throughout the whole thing this address of sort of rebalancing the scales, of inverting things. The poor will become rich, the rich will become poor, the humble will be exalted, the exalted will be humbled. The people who put themselves last will come first in the kingdom of God. It's a guarantee that Jesus reiterates time and time again. He's saying if you put yourself in a low position, if you're humble about who you are, if you're gracious to those around you, then God will see that and God will say, this is a good person, this is a servant-hearted person, a loving person who has, who doesn't have this huge estimation of their own worth and their own sense of self, but is just happy to sit there and be humble. And so God will honour that, and he'll lift you up and he'll say, this is the example of what you people should be like, and he'll put you on that head table. That's essentially what this passage is all about. It's only a short one, so I'm not going to sort of like go on about it and ramble loads. It's quite a simple little story, but it's a good little message and a really fun little illustration for Jesus giving it to us. Yeah, and then tomorrow we are going to be having part 3 of the dinner sequence, as I'm calling it, the Luke chapter 14 dinner sequence. There's one more bit to go and we will have that tomorrow. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful day. Yeah, I hope the rain clears up and everything, and that you're able to enjoy yourself, spend some time outside. Yeah, much love, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye bye bye.